want to share with you a fact that I learned recently that I think just is astounding. And we're talking about goats. Goats were domesticated 9,000 years ago. As a matter of fact, they were the first animal to be domesticated. And the interesting thing is about goats, in the world, there is more goat meat consumed than there is cattle and swine together. Goats are used to produce milk, and of course cheese from that milk, meat, and also they harvest their hair for mohair and cashmere. They also lend themselves well to sustainable agriculture, to run them behind cattle and that sort of thing, where the cattle are grazing the grass in the pasture, and the goats are out there also, but they tend to eat the weeds and the brush and the tree limbs and keep the pasture trim so that there is diversity of the pasture, that the owner is able to harvest the full content. And like cows, they are utilizing grass, a renewable resource, to convert it to something that humans then can use that otherwise would be undigestible to humans. Now, many people that are in sustainable agriculture may decide to get goats, and I want to talk a little bit about, if you make that decision that you're going to get them, do some planning. And the first place to go is to the county extension office, which you'll find they are an excellent resource to provide you with all kinds of information about goats and their traits and what kind of operations you can have. And you can decide then what kind of operation you would like to have. It's also important to read goat magazines, visit clubs that for goats, and also look at the internet, and you'll find lots of different information. You may opt for dairy goats for milk and maybe cheese making, or Angora for their hair and their fleece, or you may choose Boer goats for their meat and in a feedlot situation. Boer goats such as these here behind me. There are also some owners that choose for what I call pasture ornaments. Those are the pygmy goats that really aren't suitable for meat, and they don't produce very much milk. They're about half the size of a regular goat, and they're more or less pasture ornaments in that the owners like to watch them, and they're cute to watch the kids play and do all sorts of antics. The nice thing about the pygmy goats is, even though you're not going to harvest meat or milk from them, they still will eat brush and weeds just as the other goats do also. I'd recommend visit some goat operations, particularly those that have an operation similar to what you think you'd like to have. And if you go to a goat operation that has goats for sale and you end up purchasing goats there, it's easier to make the transition if you're moving goats from a similar operation to the kind that you're going to have. I would recommend never purchase goats from a sale barn. There's a reason that goats are for sale in a sale barn, and that is the owner is trying to get rid of them, and you're going to buy their problems if you do that. The signs to look for when you're purchasing a goat is a shiny hair coat, a lively manner, fast movement with no limping, no swollen joints, and if they are does that have an udder, make sure that the udder is symmetrical and the teats are evenly shaped. And it even pays to palpate those udders or feel them for hard spots and that sort of thing. Don't purchase goats with abscesses. If you're looking at a buck, make sure they have large symmetrical testicles. You don't want them too fat or too thin. Look at their manure. Is it pelleted and firm, or do they tend to have a loose stool that tends to be runny? And obviously you don't want to purchase them if they're runny. And lastly, and probably one of the most important things that I used to not recommend, but now I think it's essential, and that is get a fecal egg count done. This is where you take a manure sample and take it to a veterinarian or extension office, and they do a count to determine how big the parasite or the worm load is in the goats. When you're looking at goats to purchase, why, note their feet and legs. You don't want them limping. You want them to have straight legs. and also they have a certain symmetry to them that should be apparent. And you can check out that symmetry I'm talking about by going to the website that we've listed and the diagrams that we can show you what they look like. In addition, it pays to have a veterinarian in mind that's going to provide you with service, and I would discuss your purchase with the veterinarian prior to making it. If you're paying a lot of money for a goat, it's certainly worth having the veterinarian do a pre-purchase exam. That's an examination done prior to your purchase so that if there's something that you haven't observed, he or she may pick up on it for you. Also, the veterinarian should be able to tell you what diseases are occurring in the area, and enzootic diseases, that means diseases that are pretty much around in that area in case you need to do some additional vaccinations and that sort of thing. And of course, check with the seller the vaccination status of those goats that you're purchasing. Look at their mouth for their incisors, that's the teeth in front. Also check to see if they've got an overshot jaw or an overshot underjaw. It pays also to know when you're doing that fecal egg count to note their deworming status and ask when they were last wormed and what product was used. Every goat that you purchase should have identification on it. By that I mean with a tattoo either under the tail or an ear tag in the ear. And above all, get any records that involves the goat you're purchasing from the seller. That's all for this week, folks. Next in our series is feeding those goats and what kinds of pasture you use. And with that, we will see you down the road.
Down the Road is brought to you in part by Prince Agra, makers of Omnigen AF, advancing animal nutrition for healthy animals, and Woodruff Enterprise of Springfield, Ohio,